To those who would be martyrs, called to be overcomers, like the people in the Bible, I salute you. Welcome, everybody, to Mudflood was Armageddon. Mudflood was Armageddon. Don't let them tell you anything else unless they're willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. I wish I had time to get into the most important released part of their history, cavity magnetron. And, not only because if Randy was here, he could explain to you what a vacuum is and what a vacuum isn't, but the gravity magnetron, high powered vacuum tube used in early radar systems and currently in microwave ovens, a linear particle. Cavity magnetron generates microwaves. They don't show you the magnets here, but basically, this is where the heat comes from. We don't have, we can't get into it too much, but I never noticed every other one is notched. Very interesting. Learned a lot about the central cathodes and the antenna conducting microwaves when these came out. It's the Soviets and everybody had their own version about the same time as this hidden history was released that brought us to microwaves. The copper anode block to produce the resonating cavities was based on design from Colt. A lot of things going on with the magnetic lines of force, parallel, geometric axes. Like I said, around 1984, this will come into play later when we talk about this. This is the iPad's improved position and azimuth determining system. This fits in the back of a Jeep. We'll get to it. It's one of these things from position and azimuth determining system, a self-contained inertial survey system used to rapidly and accurately determine position, azimuth, and elevation. And this is from the military, the Army's field manual. They don't have field artillery surveyors anymore, but I was a field artillery surveyor, like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, even though I only had 1 year of Algebra 1 in high school. When I enrolled in the military, was brainwashed into that somebody was hurting President Carter because they had taken hostages. Well, I enrolled and I took a test, and they said, since you obviously know trigonometry, you've qualified to be a field artillery surveyor. Would you like to do that? And I said, yeah, can I jump out of planes? And they said, yeah, you can be a field artillery surveyor in the 82nd Airborne. So I ended up in Fort Bragg where these were tested. And I ended up on that crew. Little did I know that the when it's was by satellite in 84. We called it PADS as a parallel azimuth direction sender because we were told it was receiving transmissions from satellites up above, and they were triangulating with it. And, it's all part of, magnetron. Sounds like Megatron, doesn't it? But, these heat sinks, airflow, electromagnetic pulses built on this crappy interpretation of some released history they ended up with this, that somehow they smuggled to the United States and said, "We don't have any money. Can you develop this?" Because they're developing it in Germany and Japan as we speak. And the United States said, "You got it. We like the radar." There's the anode block that was fashioned from a Colt firearm. So where did they go with this? Everywhere. Everybody famous. Anti-submarine aircraft, new radars from all across the domed flat plane, and it always comes down to high frequency band, very high frequency band, cyclotron radiation. They studied it all based on 1900s. This didn't need their fake quantum physics, but with this type of a thing, the klystron, something, vacuum tubes that Stalin and Soviet Union were working on. They stole it. The Soviet Union has their own version of GPS, but like I said, watch me close it out. I don't have time to get into that, but believe me, without the cavity magnetron, you wouldn't have directed energy weapons. They do, because a directed energy weapon is, a ranged weapon that damages its target with highly focused energy without a solid projectile, including lasers, microwaves, and particle beams. Developed in DARPA, 1958. Air Force Research Lab. Everyone is using it now to where you can carry it in your pocket, but it's also for what they call ballistic missiles, hypersonic cruise. Without the cavity magnetron, where you going to be? There's an interesting mix of old world archaeology, architecture, and a modern hypersonic glide vehicle, using the cavity magnetron. But we don't, we're just saying, we could talk about this if we want. They're going to fake this stuff unaffected. Of course, their directed energy purposes are unaffected by gravity and the Coriolis effect because they don't exist. That's why it has its almost perfectly flat trajectory. Microwaves. So you can really get, you can get this blackout and it'll destroy all of your off the shelf, your COTS, commercial off the shelf electronic equipment, but it's purportedly non lethal, but they can make it lethal. Here's your anti drone gun from a Dubai air show in 2019. These are all, without the released cavity magnetron. That one's around New York City. Remember when we kind of woke up when we saw the United States rolling down the streets in Ferguson, Missouri with Humvees with those interesting attachments on top? X-rays, how do you kill people? But that's not what this is about. There's been people, telling me I'm not called by God. They're called by God. Thanks for the information about the stones crying out. Thanks for the information about the golden age past. But basically, not only me, they're Randy too, But we can't worry because we know our past. We know God put me in position to be someone that could look up a position in azimuth determining system. So I could look up those and show you that it was, an azimuth data system that allows soldiers to accomplish their mission independent of GPS availability, legacy system availability, and field artillery survey experience. That means they don't have to know what a logarithm or an azimuth is. And so, what is your basic, here's your overview. But when you determine your azimuth for field artillery, you're basing it on a flat plane. But I was always too busy as a young man being, glad I didn't have to hump that shell and could be a surveyor to worry about why I always had to adjust for magnetic north after I did my surveyors. I didn't understand the celestial sphere. Here they're talking about the azimuth, and of course they have to get into the celestial sphere and the GPS, which you know, I was there. So am I called? Have I been, was it equally called, in my younger life until I was 20? Absolutely. Was it called afterwards? Have I been trying to live a life of discipline for the Lord because I believe I've had two visions that prove I'm called, and other times I guess it could be considered trances and things like that where I study things at the right place at the right time that lead to Victor Schauberger, that lead to someone I consider my big brother like Randy, who, you know, some false Cora type individuals can call him a thug, but he's closer to a spiritual Elisha. Because I know he's not, he's not one of these, he's not a false friend. He's a big brother type. And he, if not, try to get away with talking about flat earth as being stupid around him and not being biblical. So there's azimuth. There's also the Bible verse I wanted to read today from the English Standard Version. For the king knows about these things, and to him I speak boldly, for I am persuaded that none of these things have escaped the king's notice. For the spreading of the gospel has not been done in a corner. And the corner is only used 9 times. 3 times it's used for the chief cornerstone. If you go preach on the cornerstone, things weren't done in a corner in secret. The 4 corners of the earth, twice in Revelation 20 and 21. And that does mean, it means corner. And none of my life has been done in a corner. I've explained my life as we go in real time and will continue, starting with, your reminder that did God call anybody else to say that when, well, what did this lead to? Well, it led to me in 1994 becoming geocentric. And I was still a globe lover because the flat earth veil hadn't been lifted. But I was able to understand that, you know, unlike with Jeranism, I know this happened. I worked with a Sergeant Gavin, a Sergeant Blazina, and my best friend Lance Peterson, who was a good friend of mine in the 82nd Airborne. And then when we went to the 117th Airborne Support, he was right there and we were on this crew. And it's practically, we would destroy everybody in spades. We were good friends. I mean, and we did this, which is, let's see, what does it do? Well, the new improved position and azimuth determining system that I started working on in, I think it was 82 and 83, which I wish somebody would do a Freedom of Information Act on me. Survey operations functionality, navigational accuracy, transportability, survivability, provides significant enhancement for today's Army and Marine Corps survey teams while meeting PADS accuracy, environmental requirements. iPads, the new PADS, parallel azimuth, reliable, lightweight, off-the-shelf solution developed around 4 main components: compact position, control and display. Okay. what does it do? What is it? It is a self-contained inertial surveying system. It can be used to rapidly and accurately determine position and azimuth, and you saw how azimuths were determined, and elevation in either ground or airborne survey operations. Probably your airborne survey is done with the cavity magnetron also. It is precise and sensitive piece of equipment and should be handled with the same care as any other precise survey equipment. As you're driving it around in the back of a Jeep or a Humvee. Sure. Uh, so we used it in the back of a Jeep, and now they can, the new ones can be mounted anywhere or even in a Black Hawk helicopter, which when I was in, I learned how to rappel out of the old Huey helicopters, whether I've parachuted or was using a rappelling rope. But I was also in the military when they switched from the Hueys to the Blackhawks, and that was quite a step up also. Probably needed a magnetron. But, you know, I did that. I also lived this, which is why I'm still waiting for the VA to come through. I'm on a, what is the VA, Veterans Administration Health controversy of 2014? Well, somebody would write, Veterans and Zombies, the hype behind healthcare scandal. What scandal was it in 2014? Was that around the same year I went to the VA and explained to them they should be studying psilocybin mushrooms and treatments like that, and they, did I get put on a list? It would seem like it, because I've definitely proven time and time again they don't call back. And then this controversy it wasn't a reported pattern, it was a proven pattern of negligence by the United States military against the United States military veterans. They weren't, critics didn't just charge, they proved that the veteran hospitals didn't meet their target of appointment dates within 14 days. There was no excellent care at low cost. This is a long article that basically explains an internal audit of the VA from June 9, 2014 found that more than 120,000, interesting number, veterans were left waiting and or never got care, and that schedulers were pressured to use unofficial lists or engage in inappropriate practices to make the waiting times appear more favorable. But actually, what they were saying, it was a 14-day waiting list, could have been 115, and people were not getting screened on time, and they were later dying of cancers, left off lists. They blamed the caseload. They blame the aging Vietnam veterans. But whatever it is, they blame from the last 25 years of endless wars, the young men with traumatic brain injuries, amputations, and prosthetics. They were just running out of money, so they had to put people on lists and let some people die. And it was proven over and over again. This article refers to everything as if it was present tense in 2014. And the problem is that, everybody has skin in the game, and the VA was gaming the system. They had gaming strategies. One person wrote, "It has come to my attention that in order to improve scores on assorted access measures, certain facilities have adopted use of inappropriate scheduling practices." And that was as early as 2008. But in Phoenix, VA, somebody anonymously purchased a billboard across the street from the VA hospital that says, "Check into the 2 lists, they're letting patients die." And so that broke the scandal. And, we showed it started with a Thomas Breen that had, died on November 30th, 2013. Birth certificate said he died from bladder cancer. They've proven they kept him on a list and made him wait until he died. There are other people, their mortgages, and they are trashing veterans. They know it from gaming the system how to zero out delays. It wasn't a secret at all. It was used for years in Arizona, as far as Texas, Colorado, Wyoming. At least in Grand Junction, where it was in the paper, a man died because he was on the list. But this is the scandal nobody wants to talk about, because it doesn't make America great, does it? No. And it goes on, dragging their feet. And it'll explain some people were, that more than 120,000 were left waiting and or never got care. They don't give the exact, but they learned that, do you know there's over 470 senior, every one of the 470 senior executives in the VA received performance evaluations that indicated that they were at least fully successful in each of the past 4 years. So even since 2008 and going forward, they knew they were fudging the numbers. Nobody ever got fired. They were passing out not only high salaries, but millions in bonus compensation, never mentioning the scandals. And when President Obama finally passed money and said, you fixed the problem, the money wasn't dedicated to the veterans. It said, what we need are new buildings, so let's spend all that money on new construction so we can say we've found new places, because I don't believe the lists have been taken care of. I can show I still call the military and they don't call back, and they've left me hung out to dry a number of times, proven and documented. But that's to be expected when, the Rand Corporation are the same people that are making those ultrasonic rifles and direct energy weapons for DARPA. So I don't care if they published a study in 2016 that says, yep, nothing to see here, they fixed it. I don't believe them. And neither should you. The thumbnail of the proven academic in 2014. I hope this is inspiring in people a need for more study. Finally, I want to wrap up with, is the Lord bringing us something about, the time sets of what would be the reaping, because Armageddon was at the time of Christ, and then the 1,000 years, there had to be a reaping, and then the reset where Satan's loose. How does Mary Shelley fit in? As a 16-year-old girl who got her buttons pushed and eloped with a married man when she was 16 years old. And, well, the girl he was married to at the time killed herself because, well, she was a broken-hearted 17-year-old who had eloped with that same famous writer, what was Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley? So let's study. I studied Scary Story Contest, Mary Shelley. Looks like I misspelled it. Frankenstein was born during a ghastly vacation during the year with no summer. The Ghost Story Contest. It's legendary. She ended up a 17-year-old girl. Maybe she was 19 at the time, or we're not sure. In the year with no summer, renting a house with 3 men and a girl who was pregnant by Lord Brian. a doctor who is a known Freemason, her bigamous, statutory raping, targeted bisexual genius, because the rumors are Lord Byron brought the Freemason connected doctor with him because he was kept contracting sexually transmitted diseases from the men and women that he was known to have slept with. So she gets a story about Frankenstein, and she subtitles it, recapturing Prometheus's fire. This was not done in a corner either. Of course, Lord Byron, Percy, and the Doctor all died within years of it, but the Freemason Doctor, his contribution to the scary story contest was the first book that talked about vampires who didn't like the light and lived off human blood. So the story of Frankenstein and Dracula, from, you know, people who were not giving their life to the Lord, but were responding to, their sexual desires. Thunder, lightning, and flickering candles. Mary Shelley wrote her masterpiece when I think she had just turned 19 years old. And it was the dark, stormy summer nights of that year with no summer. Strangely enough, this saga of Frankenstein started not with a vision, but a volcano. 1815, Mount Tambora, the year with no summer, 100,000 people dead, deadliest volcano over. The next summer, that growing fog, crop failures stretched everywhere. While she was being statutorily raped by a bisexual sex fiend, they hurried her off in the time of famines, epidemic, and political revolts to be inspired by three men. Tens of millions were dying from a cholera judgment by God. During those 3 years of darkness and famine, she ended up traveling around. Mary traveled, it doesn't say husband because they can't consider it a real marriage. So they have to say she traveled with her lover, the poet Percy Shelley. There you go. I was looking for that name. And their 4-month-old baby. So they weren't fooling around. They considered themselves above regular marriage. Claire Claremont, okay, that's clairvoyant enough for me, was knocked up by Lord Bryant, pregnant with child. The groundbreaking poet who would soon die, the bisexual, uh, you know, bigamist. So he's supposedly divorced his wife and continued an affair with the half sister. He decided to leave Europe, and he ended up at this house where they were going to write ghost stories. John Pelody was the on-call doctor to fight Lord Byron's diseases he caught from his sexual proclivities, and he's the one who wrote the book based. They later changed, rewrote and called it Dracula, but he's the first one to write a blood-sucking, light-fearing vampire, and and so supposedly that this is legendary history of the greatest novels ever written. In her vision, Mary Shelley, the pregnant mom hanging out very scandalously with three men in a rented house, I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then on the working of some powerful engine show signs of life. The next morning she was so excited that she said, well, she can write a story. You know, and a lot of people think the men helped her with that idea, but published in 1818, the Freemason Dracula writing doctor killed himself. Percy Shelley drowned in a freak storm the next year, and Lord Byron died of fever in 1824. Mary and the young Claire lived past the age of 50, but the book lives on. So, with that, that's about where I'm at today. So, I really would challenge people to say, what's your story? You can, you know, there's plenty of people that you can disagree with. Why are you disagreeing with me? Well, I think it's because you're convinced by Scripture that the golden age is past, and somehow you went in on that. It reminds me too much of Korah. I'm hoping it's more like the sins of Aaron and Marion, where they were, they kind of said, what, hasn't, does God only speak through Moses? Hasn't he spoken through us? And certainly God had. But remember, Marion got leprosy, and it was healed when she realized, oh, yeah. Uh, God's not going to raise up a prophet like unto Marion or Aaron. He was going to raise up a prophet, the Lord incarnate God, Jesus Christ, in the manner of Moses, like unto Moses. And I'm telling people like the big pig slapper and others, Matt, that if you're going to discount the New Testament and discount what I'm teaching, do it somewhere else, please. Because I know what I'm called for. I know what Randy's called for. You seem sketchy to me. But in the meantime, I've got classes to do. I've got work to do because we've been given talent. We're saved by grace, and each one of us is going to be judged by, did we strive to enter the narrow gate? Did we do good works, or did we just grow lazy and say, well, God's a forgiving God, and nothing I can do will ever separate me. I'll never get blotted out of his book of life. Well, something to think about. And in the meantime, I want you to remember that Mudflood was Armageddon. The golden age is past. This is a flat earth nation. I'm never going to tell you anything else. Why would I? I am proving that I've been called to have your best and my best interest at heart by warning you of the judgment to come. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci. Sayonara. Ciao.